Good afternoon for most of you. Those on the West Coast still got a few minutes left to your morning. So good morning to you and good afternoon to everyone else. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I want to thank Lacey and team for putting together an outstanding agenda for eMerge today. I hope you've been able to join a lot of the sessions today. They've been excellent. I've been able to listen to quite a few of them. This session is a partner fireside chat with our partners at Autodesk, Esri and Trimble. And these are some people that I have worked with, I have competed with, and we've dealt with one another in a lot of ways for many years. And I consider these gentlemen to be good friends, and it's just an honor to have them join us here for the fireside chat. I really appreciate that. First, a little bit of bookkeeping, okay? For those of you listening, you are muted. You will remain muted. But our procedure here is going to be is I've got a group of questions that we're going to entertain as part of the fireside chat. But when we get through with the questions that I have for these gentlemen, we're going to entertain questions from the audience. So there is at the bottom of your screen a Q&A feature that you can post questions to these gentlemen, and they will do their best to answer those. Also, this session is being recorded, as are all the sessions today, so you can come back to it later on, or you can also share it with some of your people in your company on some of the value that you see in these sessions today. So with that, let me introduce our panelists that we have today. And we have Keith Warren from Autodesk, Gary Waters from ESRI, and Ed Shappell from Trimble. And let me warn you about Ed and I first. I'll be glad this is virtual because Ed and I both are fighting the flu. And so you're protected through the screen from the flu bug that Ed and I have to fight with. But you may hear one off or both of us cough from time to time. And I got a pile of cough drops here in front of me, try to keep that under control. But with that simple introduction, I would like for each of these gentlemen to tell you about themselves and what they think is the most important thing about themselves today. Keith, tell the folks who you really are.
Well, first and foremost, I'm Ron's friend, and that's the most important thing. No, second, Keith Warren, work here at Autodesk, been here for about 10 years and cover all things transportation. And the reason why I kind of came to Autodesk is that I come from industry, and coming from industry in the transportation space, there's a lot of stuff that needs to kind of be moved forward. And I think that's what all of us have in common is that we're all about the industry. We're all about the industry moving forward. And it's just great to be on a panel with such intelligent and well-spoken people. So looking forward to the chat.
Thank you, Keith. And Gary.
My name's Gary Waters. I work for ESRI. I didn't start at Esri until 1990, so I've been around a little while and watched a lot of change. And it's always good. Ron, I love the fact that you say ESRI because it's a throwback to the old days where that's what we said. Now we're Esri. But my focus at Esri is working on the transportation team. I probably spend about 75% of my time working with the 50 state DOTs, and I have been up to my eyeballs in all of this digital delivery, BIM-FRI, connected data environments, whatever they're called, however you refer to this, for the last 4 years or so.
Great. And last but not least, Mr. Ed.
Thanks, Ron. Ed Shappell, a director in the owner public sector team here at Trimble. Probably the most important thing is that I've made good friends with folks like Gary and Keith and Ron. I mean, that's what's making this happen in the industry. It's none of us are doing it by ourselves. So I think that's probably the most important thing. So.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. And thank y'all so much for being a part of this. It's really special, and I appreciate that. Appreciate you guys being here and taking time to do this. So let's get started with our questions. And this first question, I'm going to let Gary have the first shot at it, and then we'll let Ed and Keith follow up with some additions to it. Our first question is, what are the one or two most notable technology trends evolving, and how do they impact the connected environment? Gary?
Sure. So it's interesting thinking about the one or two most impactful because technology is definitely not new to this environment. In fact, I went and did a little research. The four companies that are on this Fireside Chat were all founded at least 40 years ago. So we've been producing technology for a long time. I think my technology trends are more nuances of the existing technology environments that we operate in. And I characterize these endeavors as being more of a data modeling, system integration, and change management endeavor than just an engineering endeavor. And those first two that I mentioned are really the technology trends that I think impact the connected environment the most, and that's data modeling and system integration. So data modeling are doing things like tying pay items to design elements and capturing asset location data with construction inspection efforts and adding 3D and connecting more attribution to survey data and getting drone data and turning it into something more useful at an attribute level. So I think that getting to data models and you start drifting over into standards and all that kind of stuff, but the data modeling aspect of this technology is incredibly important. The system integration is the part where when you think of this workflow, it involves a lot of technologies just represented by the four companies here. We all produce a lot of technology. There are some overlaps, but it is a wide spanning workflow in general. And the integration of the systems is critical to really optimizing getting from design through construction to asset management. And without that system integration, we really aren't optimizing. We're continuing to just operate in silos and collect data and type things over into a different part of another system. So those would be the two I think that would be most critical, most impactful in fundamentally changing how all of this stuff works together.
Thank you, Gary. How about you, Ed?
Yeah, I mean, I think Gary nailed it on data and interoperability. I think that's a huge trend in the industry right now that every owner that we work with is after, right? They want to max the value of their existing systems and any new systems they're bringing in. To add to that, the LiDAR and image processing using AI that Gary mentioned, that's a big one. It's lowering the cost to acquire data and good, accurate data for assets, for projects. I think you're going to continue to see that grow, right? We see it growing across all of our DOTs, and the design engineers and contractors, right, are also leveraging those tools. So I think that's a trend you're going to continue to see. And then I think the second one I would mention is just, data visualization, right? The whole BIM for infrastructure, creating maps, right? With Esri, all of these things are visual ways to better use decision data. And I think you're going to see more of that. In fact, right, that you're going to see, other, let's say, standards around data visualization. There's some neat ones out there like NVIDIA's USD format for data standards, right, for visualization. So I think you're going to see more in that area, right? And I know TRB and other organizations are working on those visualization efforts. So I think those are the trends I would point out.
Thanks, Ed. And Keith?
Well, I mean, they don't leave me much on the bone to talk about. I pretty much went over everything. But I mean, standards are big, right? And I think standards cover everything from every functional area. In like what Gary talked about earlier about DOTs, there's anywhere from 10 to 20 functional areas at a DOT. They're like their own city, and you're working with all these different people. And what we've found is they generally don't talk with each other. And those are just departments. And then if you want to talk about districts or regions that they have, then you're just compounding that communication error that they're having. So I think moving forward, the next step is obviously standards with the common data environment, and then try to die that into like a design, construction, asset management, and then moving it to operations is like the big key thing. I know that me and Ed work with a number of DOTs in that space together. And I think the beauty of the industry today is, I want to say for the beginning of all of our careers, it felt like we were pushing a boulder uphill. Like we were trying to get them to adopt our solutions and trying to get them to use new things. And now they're asking for us to do more, and they're asking for us to write programs quicker and faster and more efficiently. So it's changed a little bit in the industry where now they're kind of driving the bus and they're trying to force us to get things out quicker and faster and work together. And that's where IFC and some of those other things come into play.
Yeah, it's amazing what the industry has done in requiring us all to be sure that we do work together and that we're working to the benefit of the user. And I think that's a wonderful thing because I know we've talked about that for years. And don't worry, Keith, you'll get your chance to go first also. So because I'm gonna rotate amongst you guys.
Oh
Uh,
no, we're good. We're good. Just that these guys are very knowledgeable. So it's what do you expect?
Oh, you get to set the trend. Don't worry. All right. Next question. Now I'm gonna let Ed take this one first next time. And it comes right off of what we just talked about. Okay. We're talking about our collaboration trends and being able to work together. Ed, what do you see is the biggest hurdle that we have in the industry today, and how do we as frenemies sometimes we work together and then we compete on the next project. What's the biggest hurdle and how do we work together to solve that hurdle? That's for you first, Ed.
Well, I think sometimes we get lost, in our commercial world on, why are we doing this, right? And I think if you look at what Keith and Gary and I have worked on, for instance, with Caltrans, it hasn't been about us, right? It's been about the customer. And I think that's one of the ways that, vendors are trying to get together is let's not focus on, right, our own needs, right? As vendors, let's go talk to this customer and see what they need from us as a group, right? Approach. And that creates an open environment. It creates an environment of trust, right? Sometimes we each hear painful things, right, about our own, right, companies or technologies, but you got to hear it, right, from the customer. So I think that's the biggest change, right, is a focus on what is the actual customer need, right? How do they want to get more value out of our existing systems, right? Because that is valuable to our companies. Um, Interoperability and standards help us as companies lower costs, right? So I think taking that approach is actually beneficial to all of our businesses. So I think that's part of why we're pushing it as a group. We see the benefit not just for the customer and the industry, but it really is going to help our own companies in terms of scalability and interoperability. I think Keith really nailed it, right? If I had to say what's the number one thing, it's really communication, right? If for instance, if Gary and Keith and I and Caltrans hadn't just started talking about how do we do this better, it wouldn't have happened, right? And Keith mentioned, right? If districts aren't talking to each other, right? If the departments in the DOT aren't talking to each other, it's not going to happen, right? You're going to have very siloed, maybe successes, but you can't scale those, right, to the level that you need them. So I would say it's really just keep that communication open, right? That collaboration across those silos that we've had traditionally. Even Trimble, right, has our own silos across product teams. So that's been a struggle internally, right, to make sure folks see the bigger picture. So
Excellent, excellent. Keith, what have you got to add?
So, just so the everybody in the chat here and understands like how we work together, it's just not like working at Caltrans together per se, or working in Montana together in some other aspects. It's the fact that we actually have our own kind of internal board meetings, and there are multiple levels. Sometimes it's at our level, sometimes it's above us, and sometimes it's the CEOs talking with each other to make sure that there's better alignment from top to the bottom. And that's always a good thing, because we do get caught up in our own little narratives of what we're trying to talk about and what we're trying to really promote. And I know a lot of the conversations that we've had is to say, hey, we do the same thing that you do, right? And that's across the board, everybody on this call. And so what we normally try to do is we try to communicate to the client and then to each other that there's an overlap of how our data comes across. So I'm just going to use me and Ed for right now, but like where our data overlaps is I look at that overlap as verification, like from survey or construction to design, we're validating the information and making sure it's the cleanest and most valuable for the client to use. And I think that's where we start to take a little bit of a breath of relaxation there to say, okay, yeah, we can really make this happen, and no one's trying to undermine each other at all. We're trying to work together for the common good, like Ed said earlier, and also Gary, around the client, right? The client comes first. That's the most important thing. I want to see our industry jump ahead of where the architectures are, because their BIM is way far ahead than we are with the horizontal design. And the only way we're going to get there is to work together through that process. And I think we're getting there, and it's getting a lot better. It's not perfect yet, but I know that we're moving towards that perfect. So
Thank you, Keith. And Gary, first time I worked with you guys, I made a mistake. This is 30 something years ago, and referred to you as Esri, and some guy at the top reminded me real quickly it was ESRI, not Esri. So old habits die hard. But Gary, what you've got to add to our biggest hurdle?
Well, along those lines, I used to use ESRI and Esri as a way to distinguish whether I was talking to an employee of Esri or a user of Esri, because the employees tended to say ESRI more than our customer base. So I got to tell you, I obviously have been around Esri for a long time, and I don't know that I've ever felt like more connection to a group of companies that have been working together as we all have to help the industry. So when I read this question, I was like, well, dang, I think we're doing pretty good so far. So I immediately thought about the user side of the challenges. And, I came up with things like money and change management and training and, learning from what others are doing and what is even possible as some of the biggest challenges for everyone who's embarking on this brand new world of digital delivery. And I think some of the things we could do to help the industry is promote and share what's going on with other places. Like the work that we're doing in Caltrans it's unbelievable. I mean, we're literally creating ways to seamlessly and almost instantaneously move data between Esri and Autodesk and Trimble in that particular state. And I don't know how much of the world knows that. I mean, I've seen some presentations at, Trimble's show, and there have been some other instances when I've heard it mentioned, but, learning from what's going on, figuring out how to fund these projects, that's still a struggle. I always dream up these wild things like making if digital delivery is something he feels is something they should be doing, then maybe figure out a way to carve out a half a percentage of every single project and put it into a fund to advance digital delivery. Like just figuring out how to solve some of those challenges. I think I'm probably speaking more on the owner operator side than us as a group of companies.
Thank you, Gary. And Gary, you will get the next question first, but I'm going to ask you guys to kind of put on your technology provider hats here, okay, for the next question, because we've talked about, we've known one another for a pretty good while, and we consider one another friends. We'll sit down and have a pizza and a beer every now and then, and enjoy ourselves, and it's a lot of fun at conferences when we get together, because we'll run into a situation where somebody sees where we're competing, we'll be sitting around joking and laughing with one another. And it's all been great professional all the way with all of us. But as you look at this fact that today we are working together, but tomorrow we may be competing for some big job out there. How do we balance this collaboration work to work together today and compete tomorrow? What's the secret of making that work, Gary?
Yeah, I think Ed touched on this a little bit earlier, just having that industry viewpoint and customer centric approach to making sure we're doing things. I mean, the areas that we compete in, from my perspective, from Esri's perspective, I think we feel like we do the best to produce technology in the few areas that we overlap. It's like the customer is going to have their reasons for doing things. and they make decisions, and we just need to live with that. And I think each of the companies has a very partner mentality. And I think that's probably one of the biggest distinctions. We are going out and actively pursuing working together. And we're not sitting in our offices trying to figure out how to own the world and own every single facet of all this stuff. We're recognizing that it takes a village to get this done, and we're part of the village. So I think those are some of the, some of the characteristics that have allowed us to realize that I might compete with someone next week, and I'm going to be having a beer and best buddies with them the next, and we're going to be sitting in a customer site the next. So lots of things going on there.
Thank you, Gary. Keith?
Wow. So I do know, kind of moving forward, that these gentlemen on the call with me today, we've actually joined forces and submitted on RFPs together, moving forward for the client, for the betterment. Even with Infotech, they've been a part of a couple of our RFP responses that we've done, and we've walked in there as a group of individuals, but then show that we're all about driving innovation forward. The other things are, a number of us are on the same subcommittees and different things like that for IHEAP or WashTo or TRB, working together. And some of those things I didn't know about, and maybe one of you gentlemen brought it up to me like, hey, you'd be great to be on this with us, working through this process. So we really try to join forces. I know that working with Caltrans and trying to get people to join together, we fired up a peer-to-peer call that we do once a month, and it's open. Gary shows up and Ed shows up, I show up, Caltrans shows up, and then we invite all of our friends in the industry, and it's for the industry, by the industry. And I think that speaks volumes to where we're kind of going to. It's a community. It's the other thing is Caltrans is big on not saying we're vendors. They say that we're partners. I think we're past partners. I think we're friends at this point. So I like the way that we're moving forward, and everything seems to be going well. And I enjoy the IFC process. We're hoping that we can share more data with each other, because that's the big thing when there's data loss that everybody loses, kind of thing. So, but yeah, I think we're moving forward with the better synergy, I guess, kind of is the term that would be best described.
Thank you, Keith. Ed?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bright spot for all of us, right, in terms of the future is we all win if there's more use of technology, right? And I don't think any of us are sad about that part, right? So I think that's what we all see coming. And so that benefits all of our companies. In terms of the competition, it really isn't that hard. I think that our big concern initially was we were competing over proprietary data, which was hurting the customer, right? And I think now we're competing in the right areas, which is innovation, better workflows, better automation. It's that type of approach. And really the customer, right, is going to decide what are the best tools, right? And we each have our core strengths. So I think you're going to see, right, that continue. I don't think it's going to change, right? You'll see innovation in those areas, right? But we each have core strengths that really complement, don't hurt each other, right? I think that's the other piece of it is we all need each other, right? I need designs from Keith, right? And I've got to get my data from the field into, right, Gary's systems. So I'm highly dependent, right, on them as, partners and friends, because if I can't do that, then it lowers the value of the Trimble portfolio, as an example. So I think we have the right, guidelines into the future, and none of us are going to be sad if, the audience is using more of our technologies in the future. So.
Thank you, gentlemen. I will come back to Keith on something, because Keith, talking about work at Caltrans, and of course, all of us have worked together at Montana and a couple of other agencies as well. Keith, you talked about, and I'm changing our question that we had here a little bit. And I know all of you think on your feet really well, so I'm not worried about that part of it. But Keith, you talked about getting the customer to see us as partner, or as partners, as we look at the collective group here with all of us. At the same time, the growth of technology, the movement of technology. Keith, how do we partner Infotech and Autodesk, Trimble, Esri? How do we partner to advance technology to the best of the customer?
Um, First, great question and good pivot. But I'm gonna fall back on like what we did for Montana. We had been working and talking with you guys forever, and a lot of your coworkers work with a lot of my coworkers in the past at other agencies and other firms, right? So everybody knows everybody by 6 degrees of separation. But when Montana wanted to tie into some of their ashtoware that you guys were working on, and having those conversations, the nice thing is that you guys had your wealth of knowledge working with them in different functional areas. I had my wealth of knowledge with working with them in other functional areas. Together, we knew each of the different parties, which they knew each other. So when we all sat down together to figure out, hey, how are we going to do this, right? And then we had to sit down and have our legal teams work together on writing down the T's and C's so everybody knew what they were responsible for and know what the limitations of what we could do and what you guys could do. Typically, when you talk about those things would take 6, 8, 12 months. And I think we did it in less than 3 weeks just because everybody knew each other, everybody trusted everybody. And so with doing that, we were able to plug into what you guys were doing and have your development team work with our development team and our software engineers, have those conversations with Montana so they knew how to get their assets and things that they wanted to kind of see plugged into, that they felt that it was just like sitting there, all this great data was sitting there and not being shared amongst other teams and parties. And so I think that's the strength of everybody on the call, but I think that's the strength of who we work with as clients. If it's an airport or port, rail, a DOT, etc., as long as they have a strong foundation and we bring in our strong foundation, I think those things happen relatively quickly. And I know, I think Ed and Gary touched on it earlier, is like, we're just trying to speed this up a little bit. We all hate the term at the speed of government, right? We don't want to really use that term because it doesn't really apply much anymore because we can't. We got to do stuff quicker, faster. We have to do more with less because there's less staff out there. So, I kind of went a little long-winded on that one, Gary, but I think kind of it's all those things, probably plus a little bit more than that.
How about you, Ed?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Keith nailed it, right? I mean, his Montana example is a perfect example where, right, they've done incredible work with Infotech to, set the stage of better design data and information. It's going to flow into a project that's going to flow into Trimble systems, contractor systems. So now it's our turn, right? We've got to help make sure that data, right, carries through to, for instance, Gary's systems at the end of the project. And so we're all motivated by the same thing, right? No matter which owner it is, right? I think the other piece that we're seeing, Ron, is that integration automation, the value's there, right? The work we've done with you guys to integrate some of our field devices, right, with the ashtoware platform, the customers speak for themselves, right, about the value of having, right, improved workflows and better automation in those workflows. So we anticipate that, right, every DOT is going to want more of that type of work. And I think Keith and Gary are getting the same requests, right, from their DOTs, is how are they going to leverage, right, more of these integration approaches with the Infotech team. So
Cool. And Gary?
Yeah, I don't know that it's been explicitly said. I know underneath all that discussion that Ed and Keith just presented, I think it's the addition of the corporate level relationships that this group of companies have formed that are really helping our mutual customers and the entire industry, where in most other industries or in a lot of places, even with other companies that are vying for work in this area, they're still building their particular silo to the best of their abilities. And I think what we've done, all four of us, is figured out how to keep pushing the technology in our respective areas of expertise, yet have that thought process that it only really makes a big difference to the customers if we can move data between our systems. I mean, our relationship with Autodesk, we're jointly building products together. I mean, that's to me, that's almost unheard of. I know the rest of us, we just work at a very detailed corporate technical level to make sure data is moving in and out of these things. And you see things like the Ashtoware Open API as a way to start opening up and sharing integration capabilities, and we're able to take advantage of those kinds of things. So I think you just can't downplay the way in which we interact together as corporate entities, and always keeping that customer context in the forefront. So we're building things. Keith's example of something that usually took 12 months and now all of a sudden it takes several weeks or 6 weeks. Some of that is created because of us as companies working together outside of the context of the customers, by taking what we've learned and knowing that there might be some nuances here from one customer to the next, but fundamentally, this is the workflow that's being done, and this is where the data is captured, and this is how the data is formatted and how it needs to move on to the next system. So,
and Gary, I want to add something to that too, is we're in the middle of doing this, right? Or at the very beginning stages of doing it, working with one of your coworkers, Micah, right?
Mhm.
And we're working on a couple of things around the LA fires, but we're already kind of working around other things in California that were coming up too. And I think all four of us are going to probably be working together quite closely on helping those guys move that needle quicker for all those people who have lost their homes and others. And seeing the data that you guys have already collected is absolutely amazing. And I'm just looking forward to seeing how fast we can turn those things around and help people out.
Yeah, I think it's a great example, Keith, right? That we're all contributing, right, to the data sets that are going to be leveraged to rebuild. And that's it. That's needed, right? And we need to continue to support that effort.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. And we're going to move to, we've got some questions from the audience, and we're going to move to some of these questions from the audience. And on this, just whomever wants to jump in first, please do. And the first one I'm going to bring from the audience, and it was submitted anonymously, and I love the question. When did the relationship between these big four and this industry change from competition to collaboration? What was the turning point? So who wants to jump on that one?
I'll jump on it first, but then I know that Ed and Gary can jump on this. So from my perspective, right, I've started here about 10 years ago here at Autodesk. But before I got here, one, I worked with all these separate companies individually. I've worked with Autodesk in the past when I was on the private side, worked with Esri, and I've also worked with Trimble. And so I knew a bunch of those people from that aspect of it. But coming on board, and then one of my first clients was Caltrans, and there was people that were already working, I want to say 2 or 3 years before I even started, who were working with Caltrans, and it was tight, but it wasn't as tight as it is today. So Molly and a gentleman by the name of David Fagerman, who's friends with all of us also, those guys were the ones who really built those relationships. And the funny thing is when I started, about 2 years later, Molly and David kind of retired around the same time, and we had a big barbecue, and they were like, okay, we're going to hand this over to you guys, you, Ed, and Gary, don't screw this up, take this to the next level. And so from my recollection, that is when it first started for me. And then working in that space with those guys, that it just blew up into all these other areas of where we work in transportation and owner space. So it's been a joy for like the last 10 years. So that's my recollection.
Yeah, I think it's hard to put a time. I mean, I'm trying. I've been around for long enough. You'd think I would know the exact point in time at which this happened, but I feel like probably a decade ago, or maybe not quite that. I don't know. Maybe it was a decade ago. I feel like everyone recognized that we were industry leaders in our respective areas of extreme expertise. We had some overlap, and I think all of the companies just realized, as Ed so eloquently said a few minutes ago, we actually rely on each other. Like, so if we rely on each other to really make our customers ultimately as successful as possible, then it's almost dumb to just look at ourselves as competitors when that's 5% of our world versus 95% of our world. And
Right.
I don't know, it happened somewhere in there, and we just once we broke that barrier down and started working together, we probably realized, hey, Keith's not actually a bad guy, even though he has an Autodesk thing. But, like I can actually sit and talk to Ed about things, even though he's from Trimble. And, it just kept things going, and we haven't dropped it. And we're using ourselves, but we literally are speaking almost for our whole company. I mean,
We are. Yeah.
this is not an Ed and Gary and Keith thing. It's Esri or Ron. It's Infotech and Esri and Trimble and Autodesk that are making this happen. We just happen to be the voices today that you're hearing.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with the timeline. It started, probably 10 years ago, to Keith's point. I back then I was, strictly working with our civil contractors at Trimble, and you can bet that every day I saw the need for, right, how do we get better existing asset data, right, from a system like Esri? How do we get, right, better models, right, from Autodesk, right, to run our survey and our machine control systems, right? So it started there, really. And, as we've evolved, right, I think, the one thing I would say is, Caltrans was the catalyst, right? We've all been working, let's say, together as pairs, right? Autodesk Trimble, Trimble Esri, Esri Trimble. But, Caltrans was a little bit of a catalyst to bring the three together, right? And look at it in a more holistic way, right? And that probably was what, 5 years ago, Keith and Gary, that event happened. So, it took a while, but I would argue that if we didn't have our individual experiences with each other and the value that brought to customers, it would have been harder to get together as three companies. So,
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, I'm by far the oldest in this group, so let me give a little history lesson
Are
of first time that we came back together. And I'm the only one here retired, okay? The first time that I can remember we really starting earnestly working together was in 98 or 99. And I worked for a company called Intergraph at that time. And um, Autodesk and Intergraph were vicious competitors. The gentleman, David Fagerman, that Keith alluded to, David worked for me at Intergraph. But I got a call from a gentleman from Autodesk by the name of Nathan Cruz. And Nathan was working on something called Easy, and it was going to become Land XML. And Nathan asked, is there any way that Intergraph would work with Autodesk and working with Nebraska Department of Roads, as they were called that time? It was Steve Brown from Nebraska. Would Intergraph work with us, and let's define this Land XML standard that's going to become the new standard for exchanging data from that standpoint. And I said, sure, let's do it. And Nathan was absolutely totally silent, probably for for 30, 40 seconds, going, really? Y'all work with us? And that was the first one. And we moved from that to we were wanting to interface the Intergraph product, civil product, with Trimble. And we started working with Trimble to bring data from the collectors into the design solution, again, using Land XML as a tool. And over a 2 or 3 year period, now Intergraph wouldn't talk to Esri, their life depended on it at that point in time. So Esri wasn't a part of what we were doing at that time. But that was the first time I know that we really started coming together and trying to do things together. And Nathan and Steve Brown, and a guy that worked for me, Richard Bradshaw, at that time at Intergraph, they were really the pushers to try to get us all work together. And I was trying to remember the gentleman's name at Trimble that we worked with, and my memory's short after retirement, but that was interesting. So thank y'all for your input. Again, I'm the old guy in the room. Okay, another question from the audience, and this one I heard some reference to it earlier on. What is the potential of AI in this collaboration world that we're trying to work together as multiple technology providers? Who wants to tackle that?
Yeah, I mean,
I'll go. Go ahead.
go ahead,
Ed.
Gary. Well, I think, I think this goes back to the whole discussion on data standards, right? I think interoperability and data standards allow any user of AI to apply it to a much broader data set, right? It's going to give you richer information. It's going to give you better decision-making data. I think that's part of why we're working on this interoperability and these data standards together, is that there is a goal, right, to get to better decision-making, for every department in a DOT as an example, right? Planning, design, survey, they all would love, right, better information to help them make field decisions, office decisions, right, budget decisions. And so I think that's, the potential is unlimited, right? And I think that it's really our goal as vendor partners to allow, right, that use of processing, right? I think that it's not as valuable, right, if you applied AI to just one of our environments, right? If you can bring our data sets together and then apply, right, the AI processing as an example, far richer, right, experience, far richer inputs and outputs that you're going to get out of that type of process. So I think it's lowering costs, as I mentioned. It's going to cut down on time, right? I think workflows will take far less time. And hopefully, right, it can help us even with things like, QA, QC and catching, right, errors and risks in data flow and workflows that we're sharing together. So that's my view.
Yeah. Gary, you want to go next? You want me to go?
You can go.
Okay. So, I just came back from an Autodesk event where it's all of our technical people and all of our development team, and AI was a big part of that conversation, probably like everybody's firms and everybody's agencies and even our vendors that we're working on this call. But the main thing is Ed touched on a lot of those things is, predicting risk and kind of moving those things forward. But then also, managing and maintenance of all the equipment and tracking all that and letting us know when things need to be replaced. Compliancy and the digital twin, it's going to be a big part of going through and doing that stuff. I had to speak on this at a keynote one time, and I kicked it off by asking like how many people were afraid of it. And it was amazing. Like almost everybody raised their hand. Everybody was afraid of AI. But thinking about it after I did that keynote, kind of came to the conclusion that if you take AI and you look at it like it's an intern, right? What do you give an intern? You give them the repeatable work that's relatively easy, that can be done streamlined and as fast as possible. So, but with any intern, you have to check their work, right? So that's the way I look at AI is it's going to be stuff that can be repeatable, that can speed up that process, but there has to be somebody checking that data once it comes out. So it's just not put it in the machine, it comes out, it's all good. It still has to be verified. So I'll turn the keys over to you now, Gary.
All right. Yeah, and I look at AI probably through two lenses. One is more generative AI, which I characterize as being able to just speak to a computer and have AI give you information back. Like, what is the best way to design this bridge, or what is the best way to analyze this construction data or this material data. So I feel like there'll be some real benefits in getting to the point where you'll be able to just ask a question and get some answers, where now that requires, let's just say it's a GIS analytic. It requires that GIS professional to be able to get to that kind of information. They would build the tool that might make it easier, but I think we'll see AI being able to help even with the configuration and the creation of tools that we can then apply and start to get information out of. So I'm really excited about it. It is scary. I think I probably fall into the half scared of it uh, at times because you hear all the stuff about, oh, it's going to replace everyone's jobs and all this, but the more I look at it, the more I see what we're doing from an AI perspective. It just seems to be enhancing what the people are doing, not completely replacing them. I'm sure there'll be some functions that can get replaced, but certain things it's going to really help. I think of like a construction inspector. If we could get to the point where you just flew a drone over a construction site and you had a daily progress report came out the door, and the human sat there and said, "Oh yes, that is a cable barrier, and it seems to adhere to the specs." So, improvement.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would add to that, Ron. I think one of the interesting, right, potentials of AI is workforce development, right? I mean, we have a workforce shortage. I think there's a potential for AI to help us upskill folks both in our domain and with the use of technologies, right, like AI. And I think that's an interesting opportunity, right? I think that could make it much easier, right, for us to train new folks coming into our industry on what do they need on the domain side? What do they need to understand on the technology side? AI is actually a perfect, right, opportunity to do that type of upskilling with. And I think the pace of technology requires, right, a way to train and educate, right, at a rate that keeps pace with how technology is changing.
Awesome answers, gentlemen. I love it. I'm with Gary. I'm on that half scared side on that. And I like what Ed and Keith added to it from the standpoint there still has to be human interaction to keep Gary and I from being 100% scared instead of just half scared. But so great answers.
Well, at
Um,
least you're retired, so you don't have to worry about it taking your job.
this is true. This is true. Got time for one last question from the audience, and this is kind of a two-part question, and it is how do we accelerate the process of interoperability, and are there funding resources out there we should be tapping into to encourage our technology partners to move forward with interoperability?
Yeah, I mean, I could start, right? I think the best part of, the best news is we already have, right, some ADCMS programs underway with federal grant money. Those are going to benefit everyone in the industry, right? That's the goal, is to develop interoperability across all of those. And I can tell you every one of these vendors is involved in some of those projects. And you're going to see some pretty incredible, let's say, new offerings in terms of integrations, right? Workflows that are being built through those ADCMS programs. The SMART grant programs, a lot of our DOTs take advantage of SMART grants. We help and will help any DOT, right, and partner submit on SMART grants. I know that you're going to see more of those, right, coming out. Um, there's always the pooled funds, right? And so I think there's a lot of discussion around how do we, leverage those pooled funds to drive more, right, work and move faster on interoperability. I think that's a great, idea. I think it ties into some of the data standards and IFC work, right, that's being done as well around the pool funds. And I think, last one is some of the new programs, right? I'm excited about the Everyday Counts 8 program that's coming out from Federal Highway, which is really focused on drones, right? And how are we leveraging drones and drone data as an industry? So I think you're going to see more funding, right, tied into that EDC 8 program that's coming out soon. And I would encourage everyone to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and I think, just to kind of pile on with where you're going was just with the industry collaboration and policy influencers, so like AASHTO, TRB, and FHWA, having those guys step up a little bit more to make sure that we're all working together. I know a lot of the conversations I have with the transportation owners, especially with the DOTs, you know, they see like, hey, you guys are working together and IFC seems like it's going to be the best fit, but it's not moving as fast as they would like it to move. Somebody has to be the parent in the room, right? And it can't be any of us kids here in this call. It's going to have to be someone from the federal government side who's going to have to regulate and force probably us to work a little bit closer together, even though they don't have to, but making sure that data sharing is going forward. Because yes, we share right now, but we don't share everything, right? And so that data loss doesn't really help the client at the end of the day. And so we're trying to get over that hurdle, right? Like we said earlier, we're working on our relationships and we all feel like we have a great working relationship. That's the next level of trust, is if giving the majority of that data out for everybody to use equally is going to be the biggest part for the interoperability. And so if we can organize an interoperability summit with all the vendors and all the partners and everybody involved, I think that would be the key to get there. And I think we're getting closer to that at like a TRB or an iHeap.
Yeah, I hate to just point out probably the obvious, but Ed mentioned a bunch of the different grant programs, and the underpinning of every single one of those is money. And I think that, we have to have the opportunity to create the integration or the interoperability, which is driven by the customers, but it takes money in some way, shape, or form. I think all four of the companies on this call have invested from their own corporate resources in creating that interoperability. But going to whoever it is that sets aside money from the highway trust fund that could be allocated towards digital delivery, those programs that are supported, there's safety funds, there's pavement funds, there's bridge funds, and it wouldn't be a bad thing to have digital delivery funds. So some apportionment from FHWA coming out to all of the DOTs would allow those things to be built. Or people use the state planning and research funding, SPR money, to do some of these innovative kinds of things. I think that is the key thing. A lot of the state DOTs brag about, 98% of our money went into the ground. I don't mean into the ground, like they build assets, that they're supporting infrastructure with 98. So there's only 2% that gets applied to overhead. And, maybe we need to start thinking of that in the ground part as some of the information technology back end that's helping make better decisions or provide streamlined processes to make that money go farther. And maybe that's a way to make it happen.
Well, and I would just add one last thing too, is what Keith said around adoption of data standards, right? Interoperability is hard today because Keith, Gary, and I are supporting multiple formats today. If we reduce that, right, guess what? That frees up resources and money to focus more on interoperability. And so it's actually, right, this isn't just a vendor, right, challenge. We need our customers to help us by moving and adopting. And that's been slow, right? And it's hard, right? There's a lot of process change involved in a move on a data standard. So I think all three of us understand that, and we've seen our own pain and challenges with data standards internally. So it's not going to be easy, but that's a great way to accelerate, right, innovation and interoperability.
Well, and to speak to that, Ed, I mean, you have seen firsthand, and I've seen, all of us have seen firsthand, like in Europe, where the countries are the size of a small state here, they can have, countrywide standards. But at least we know it can be done. And so we just need to work towards and steal some of their ideas of how they did it and apply it over here in the US.
But someone has to stamp it as a standard. My best joke about standards is, the great thing about standards? There are so many of them.
That is so true, gentlemen. And that will wrap us for the day. And gentlemen, I just cannot thank y'all enough for joining me in this fireside chat. You guys are truly luminaries within our industry, and I'm gonna miss you guys as I sit by the hunting campfire and enjoy the hunting camp, Camp Gann as I refer to it. But thank y'all so much for being a part of Infotech's Emerge Conference. Thank you for the valuable insights that you shared with the audience. I want to thank the audience for spending the day with Infotech. Lacey started you today. I'm going to turn it back over to Lacey to close you out for the day.
Thank you, Ron. And to Gary, Ed, and Keith, that was a really great conversation. I truly felt like we were sitting around a fire and just having a conversation, listening to y'all talk about what you're doing to advance the industry. Thank you for being here. Thank you to our attendees who have spent the day with us. We know that a virtual conference can certainly be filled with fatigue over 5 hours, but we have had an incredible day of topics ranging from workforce development and hiring veterans in your construction roles to really looking at the national strategic roadmap and what does bidding look like in DPD. So we have really focused on what is mattering the most to the industry right now. And I hope that you are walking away not only with new ideas, but maybe new connections, someone that you met in the lobby chat throughout the day. We absolutely loved seeing the conversation and knowing where you were joining from. As we conclude today, I want to wrap up with a few reminders that I started with this morning. We would love to know what your favorite session of the day is. You can either drop it in the chat or right now, but if you have a favorite quote or a favorite presenter that you want to give a shout out to, we would love to see that on LinkedIn using the hashtag emerging solutions. We mentioned earlier that we have prizes that we are giving away for people who attended Emerge 2025. Just by entering any session today, you were automatically entered, but I did tell you after the keynote this morning that you would be getting a post-event survey in your inbox, and it's going to hit your inbox very soon. And we really encourage you to do that because we take your feedback seriously. We want this event to not just be something that you attend every year and check the box, but we want you to walk away with really valuable insights that are helping you really be a champion user and a game changer in your organization. So please let us know what other topics you are interested in. Let us know if there's a specific speaker that you would recommend joining us for Emerge 2026, because we take that into account as we are planning for next year's event. And finally, an additional way, if you are a current Infotech, Appia, or bidexpress.com user, I highly encourage you to leave a Capterra review, and that will give you additional entries. If you are looking to get a professional development hours certificate for the number of sessions and total hours that you attended today, this upcoming Monday, you will get an email that will be very easy for you to complete a few steps to make sure that you are getting a certificate that accurately reflects your attendance at Emerge 2025. With that, I cannot say thank you enough. A huge shout out to the Infotech marketing team who works so hard to put on a conference like this. We hope that you are walking away super excited and super motivated, and we cannot wait to see you at Emerge 2026.